welcome back to another episode of Class Horrorcast. I'm your host, as always, Aran, and I'm joined once again by a very familiar face at this point, Tom from the Strange Brew podcast. How are you, sir?
What's going on, man? I'm super stoked for this. I made myself an early morning iced coffee because, like we always mention, the time difference is quite a bit.
Yeah, I know, right? It's like I always feel like I'm like, oh yeah, it's like dinner time for me, and like I have to like wake you up.
I know.
At, like first thing in the morning to try and get ready for this shit.
It is very funny. And when I was, for all the listeners who don't know me already, I like to use psychedelics. And there was a time where I was during a mushroom trip, I was thinking about you, and I was like, okay, it's this time, and the sun's in this part of the sky, and where he is, but then it's over here on my side. And it's like I was having that tripped out thought of like so strange that it's just like it's delayed. So even if I like, if I took a rowboat and I could for some reason do like a Popeye stroke where I'm like just super fast, it would still, the time I would hit your fucking island, it would be dark and shitty. And it's just like, and then I wake up in the morning and it's sunny here while it's dark where you are. It's just a strange thought, the fact that, all over the world, there's all these different time differences, and you have to kind of like, especially when recording, try to figure, okay, what's the best time for both of us?
Yeah, that used to really bother me actually as a kid. Every time I used to go to the States, we'd go for like 2.5 months during the summer. And when I would come back for like weeks and weeks, I would always be like, oh, it's like 1 p.m. in New York right now. Oh, and it's 6 p.m. here. I hate this.
It is fun. It's always like trying to, and like every time we record, kind of like, we kind of like have to figure out what's the fucking best time for both of us a lot of times. And it is fairly funny because even when we got the live show coming up for Halloween and stuff like that, it's just like we're going to be starting the live session at 6:30 Eastern time, and it's going to be 12:30 your time?
11:30.
It's going to be 11:30? Okay, that's not as bad, actually.
No, that's not too bad.
I was like...
Something like that, though, I feel like is... like I can't miss out on that. If that was like 4 a.m., I feel like I'd still have to make it work.
Oh, yeah. It's going to be a lot... Like, we have a lot of stuff coming, but that's going to be really exciting. I'm just super stoked to do the live special. And I said to the boys, I was like, I want it to go long. I was like, I want people to pop in and out and, be able to enjoy the live. So I was like, who knows? Like, if we're starting... I was like, we got to start earlier for Aaron because it might go for like 2 hours. You know what I mean? Or even 2 hours and a half. Knowing all four of us and how that's going to be. I feel like we're going to be all over the place, that's for sure.
Yeah, I can only imagine. So for everybody listening, if you haven't figured out at this point, we are going to talk about, I guess, the life of Rob Zombie from his work, probably more so towards his work from his movies to music and some other things he's gotten into. A little bit of backstory, I guess, about him in general, but a lot of it is going to be focused on the movies he made and his music.
Yeah, I'm repping my my shirt with the little boy Michael, and then it's spliced with his mask and the knife. And we'll talk about like every aspect, I'm sure, of his movies and the certain things he said he was going to do and then wasn't going to do, but then did anyway. And it's and one thing I gotta say is, we'll get into it, I'm sure, but like I maybe necessarily didn't give his music as much as a try as I should have when I was younger. I had buddies that were super into White Zombie and Rob Zombie's music, and I remember hearing some songs like, okay, I like this, but I never actively bought an album. Or like when we started getting MP3s, because I'm a 90s kid, and downloading it, I never download like Rob Zombie's music videos or songs. And now revisiting it, I was listening to a lot of his music, and I genuinely do enjoy it. And I see why my buddies were into it. And it's like heavy metal, heavy rock. You could say, you probably get mad if I said heavy rock, but it's heavy metal. And but there's some very catchy songs where even my fiance does not like it. She called it trailer park trash metal, and like that's what it reminded her of.
Nice.
Which is no offense to fucking Rob whatsoever. It's just my fiance's point of view. But I even got a Dragula stuck in her head where she was humming it, and I was like, see, it's fucking catchy.
It is, and there's a couple of songs I'm sure we'll talk about later on that I think obviously they have like a pretty big cult following, but I'm surprised that they didn't catch on maybe a little bit more, considering that a lot of his work has been featured in like other movies, huge franchises, games, and stuff like that.
Yeah, I feel like specifically either Living Dead Girls or Dragula was off of a game. Like I think maybe like a Tony Hawk game, because I can remember playing like Tony Hawk and hearing that soundtrack. Some game like that where I think it might be Tony Hawk. Because he had obviously like all the playlists on Tony Hawk were dope. Like most time you had like there'd be like No Effects, the next song. So I feel like I remember one of those songs, especially like when you're sitting there with buddies smoking up and you're playing the game, trying to like beat each other at like trick mode and shit like that.
So I suppose before we dive into it, outside of his music, then movie wise and just in general, are you a fan of Rob Zombie or?
Oh yeah, for sure. And that's the thing too, is like I do enjoy his cinema, and I know there's problems, but there's problems with every movies. But things that he has created truly through his own artistic means. I'm talking about his like not Halloween, not his vision of Halloween, but his movies are actually quite good. Like I just watched 3 from Hell again, and it's just a good done action style horror movie. And even House of 1,000 Corpses, I can remember when I first saw it. I've mentioned this friend before, but I grew up with that kid with the Pop and Ship Night. And it's like Pop and Ship Night every Saturday. And I remember watching House of 1,000 Corpses at his place and maybe being like, I would think 12, maybe 13. And it, especially the scene when they pull up and they jump down from like the scarecrow post, it like creeped me the fuck out. Yeah. Like there's some very like House of 1,000 Corpses is, you could arguably say is one of the best horror movies out there when it comes to what kind of style it is. When you think about like a Maniac style horror movie, or something like these psychopaths are out there, almost like akin to like Texas Chainsaw Massacre style, but it was very well done. And I do want to later discuss what I think probably his influences were and stuff like that, and you can see it within some of his movies.
People probably have already heard me say this at points. I always mention Blair Witch Project as one of my favorite movies.
Yeah.
And this would be probably the other. This is definitely like in my top 3 movies.
That's interesting that Blair Witch is one of your top ones. And you said you would like to do a commentary or like an episode on the Blair Witch, or both.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would. And I think with the Blair Witch as well, obviously it's kind of hard to, it doesn't have as much, I guess, rewatchability. Is that even a word?
Yeah.
You know, once you've seen it, like the whole illusion is kind of shattered. But I love the lore and how deep
it's
that
still
all went.
It's still
like
creepy.
Books and yeah, and like every now and again, I try not to watch it that often anymore because I've seen it probably 100 times. But I try to not watch it and then like watch it, or like then maybe afterwards like go to a trail in the woods and stuff, and I'll be just like trying to like.
Well, that's what we walk through. There's a place near where I'm at where it's like kind of like a, I don't know, like trails, but it's like pretty deep in the forest. And I posted on the Instagram page a while ago, and I put like the Texas Chainsaw Massacre theme, like, like, you know, they found this house in the middle of nowhere, because in this trail, this area, this wooded area, I was playing the Blair Witch game, and it did remind me of this. And there was like an old car on top of a hill, and there was like satanic fucking imagery and like spray paint all over the car, and it like creeped me out. It's at the top of this hill, and that's just farmland like beyond this car, and it was fairly creepy. Which, you know, obviously we're getting to Rob Zombie, but there is a lot of stuff that we have talks in the talks to work on. And I think Blair Witch doing a commentary even first and then discussing the film on another episode might be something that people would be interested by, because there is a lot of good points about that film and the way that it was supposed to make you feel, especially when it first came out and it first hit theaters. And like I said, I remember watching my basement being freaked out.
Yeah, and And even though it's been covered like multiple times, I still feel like that there's an angle that we could come at that from, and I suppose the fanfare surrounding Blair Witch still, considering it's not been like a massive franchise that's had like a million sequels.
Yeah,
and, like,
I don't know what they would have done with that.
And like shit tons of merchandise and stuff. It still seems to have like this huge like respected place in horror.
Yeah, and I think it would be worth watching. So you're essentially saying that like your number one is probably Blair Witch, just because the feeling and the ambiance of the film, and then House of 1,000 Corpses, which are two very different films.
Yeah, I know, right? House of 1,000 Corpses is probably like my favorite comfort horror movie. Like, that's a movie and this is no word of a lie, I have probably seen House of 1,000 Corpses at least 200 times.
I would say,
Easy.
even me, I would say maybe 20, like at the most. And we just watched it too. That's why this was such a good to get into, because I think a couple months ago, me and my girl, we sat down, we rewatched it, and then I wanted to watch House of 1,000 or Devil's Rejects, and I don't think I got to that one, even though I've seen it very much. But the thing is, I'll tell you a kind of funny story. I worked with this old lady, okay, when I was a chef, this prep lady. She's probably at the time was like, I don't know, gotta be like 68, maybe close to 70, very like little old lady. First, she's like, "Oh, I know you like horror. Here is here's this book," and she gives me this book called Black Magic Killers, and it's all about. And I would love to find it. I gave it to somebody, and they never gave it back, which is sad, because I wanted to use it for the podcast when I first started getting the podcast going. And it was all about these stories of people like who got into black magic and killed people. They kind of mentioned people like Richard Ramirez. But there was a story about in the 1600s how this like this priest convinced all the nuns to have sex with him. And then when the nuns had sex with him, they all got pregnant. And then when they got pregnant, he sacrificed the fucking babies and like cooked and ate them. And like did this horrific shit, and this was like a real story from like medieval times, and all these crazy stories in this book. And I'm like, this little old lady gave me this fucking book, and then she's like, I know you're super into horror movies. I have an extra copy of Devil's Rejects, and she fucking gave it to me. And I don't think I have House of 1,000 Corpses on a DVD. I thought I did, but she gave me like two like really graphic horror movies. Devil's Reject was one of them, and I was like, shit, man, this little old lady like watches brutal ass Rob Zombie films. Like, I was like super surprised, actually.
And I will go on record as well as to say that that's probably one of my favorite trilogies of movies ever. I feel like look, a lot of people go, "Oh my God, Rob Zombie's such a bad filmmaker." Oh my God. I feel like for what he was going for, those three movies, while I think in a lot of ways like they're vastly different, and the tone kind of
changes, goes
a little bit all over the place, I definitely think that they still fit within the same realm. And what I love is, even though he's, I suppose, capped it off with Tree from Hell, we still don't have any real answers to a lot of the questions.
No. And people can say whatever they want, right? But cinema and art is subjective, and it's all about perspective. So you could, people like fucking Prince in Purple Rain. I don't really like Prince, but I'm not going to fucking shame someone for liking Prince. Prince knew about chemtrails. So it's like, it's all about this, like, it is about perspective, about what people see and what they enjoy out of things. And yeah, they're like three completely different films who still somehow carry somewhat the same tone of, because the characters really carry the films. But either way, any way you slice it, he did create something that was completely unique and not like anything else I've ever seen. And
that's what I think I've always loved about him. I suppose, look, before we start to get into his actual work, maybe just a little bit of an overview about him and his, I guess, his early life. So for anybody who is watching this on video, obviously there is times we might be referencing things that are on screen.
Yeah.
So there will be a video version of this as well that will have images and different things on screen. So he was born Robert Cummings. He's best known as an American singer, songwriter, and filmmaker. From a young age, he loved horror films and wanted to be just like Alice Cooper, Steven Spielberg, Bela Lugosi, and more. When he was young, his parents worked in a carnival, but apparently, according to the Joe Rogan podcast, he cites his leaving as a night a giant riot broke out at the carnival, and they were like setting tents on fire and shit, and dudes were getting hit in the face with hammers.
Yeah, the dude's like, there was one guy that was like, hey, get out of here. He's trying to help, obviously, maybe Rob Zombie and his friends, obviously younger kids. I think he said he was like, a preteen, kind of like pretty young. Did he mention how old he was? I feel like he was like, maybe like 10, 11, 12, something like that.
Yeah.
And
yeah, I think that's...
And then so he saw as this guy's trying to help them and kind of get them out from all the chaos that's ensuing. Somebody runs up and smashes this guy with a hammer. And Rob said it was like his face was no more. Like his face was gone.
Which is fucking like, it's wild.
No wonder he's the way he is, man. It's like...
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. I wondered, like, did a lot of this stuff start to mold him from a young age into, like, maybe his style being more graphic and, like, raw?
Well, it does remind me, if you ever want to talk about this scary gentleman, we could always talk about Marilyn Manson, but it does remind me of Marilyn Manson's story about how he like found this satanic Bible, and it's actually an interesting story, and how he sees this house in the middle of nowhere. All this scary stuff happens that we'll probably talk about in another episode. And they summon some sort of demon, and they go to the house the next day, or where they think the house is, and the house is gone. And Marilyn Manson was like, and this is why I am the way that I am today, which reminds me of how Rob kind of probably saw some very graphic things that influenced him already, if he was already into horror movies, and that kind of like... especially as he's growing up and horror movies are progressing to get more violent and graphic, rather than just being like the monster films that we all know of and love, of, this spooky guy walking around, or like a zombie coming out, or Dracula subduing a girl, but you don't get to really see anything. It's more left up to the imagination. And then he's seeing like something completely real and completely disturbing that I'm sure traumatized him in some sort of way that he may not even know.
Yeah, and that's actually, I'm glad you brought that up, because that's another one I think we should add to the bank. Marilyn Manson is another fascinating character, another guy who I'm super into in a lot of ways.
I like his music.
I don't know. Yeah, and I don't know if many people have, because I feel like a lot of people haven't either heard of it or don't even know it exists. But his autobiography is one of the most interesting, but also one of the most fucked up books I think I've ever read.
It would be interesting to talk about him, and it kind of goes in the same realm of, I find that Rob Zombie and Marilyn Manson share that same kind of, these people, I don't know, that are very unique in their music style. Like, I actually listen to more Marilyn Manson than I've ever listened to Rob Zombie, and just very like creepy, like strange, like someone who is targeted by the media, as Rob Zombie was too, of like, don't listen to this satanic, disgusting music kind of thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure. And it's funny because both those guys are incredibly intelligent in more ways than just like, being creative with music or movies or anything.
Their
like
IQs
that.
are both
they're
really high.
Yeah, and like they're really well spoken. So yeah, in the early 80s, Rob moved to New York City, where he served as a production assistant on Pee-wee's Playhouse.
Fucking Paul Rubens, man.
And he also talks a lot about his time in Manhattan when he was that age, like he was young. Some of the shit that he had seen, and just like some of the situations he had been in. And he said, like, at the time he didn't really feel like, it was just like, oh, it's just another day, whatever. I guess he was young, but he was like exposed to like wild shit, I think.
And
there as well.
Yeah, and I heard that too. And he was talking about where even there's a rapper named Ari the Rugged Man. He has a song all about the 80s and how like New York was at that time, and how like essentially crazy New York was in this wild, wild west style big city that people come to live out their dreams. But he's like, Rob said he was like walking past like a dead body. He saw, did he not see someone get murdered in a murder trial? Like later on, it was a trial that he was supposed to be a part of.
Yep.
And it just shows like how he was influenced by these very dark, disturbing things that happened within his life. And back in the day, especially in the 80s, New York was a wild place with you got gangbangers, you got mafias, you got prostitution, you got like, there's a lot of things happening in New York at this time era.
Yeah. And it's kind of, I suppose, glossed over now, people I think don't really realize how fucking wild it was. The idea of saying something like, oh, the Wild West, it seems kind of cartoonish.
Yeah.
Now we think of like the Wild West as like fucking Will Smith's Wild Wild West movie, whereas that's not actually what people meant. Like, it was just so fucked and like horrible and like dirty, cold, and just like sick. So not long after this, he took the stage name Rob Zombie. He took this from a 1932 horror movie named White Zombie, which starred Bela Lugosi, which the movie title also served as the name for his band at the time.
Have you seen White Zombie? I feel like I have, like, way back in the day.
Yeah, probably. So he founded White Zombie with his then girlfriend. They released several EPs, but didn't really have much success as far as I know. They were just kind of like doing their thing.
She looks like very close to Cheryl Moon.
Yeah, 100%.
She's fairly attractive.
Yeah, she's not bad, and I think they actually, I'm not 100% sure, but I think they might have broken up before they like started to get like noticed properly.
Yeah.
They had been together, I think, for several years, and then in '92, they caught the attention of Geffen Records at the time. So
and he was saying that there's other records looking at him, right?
Yeah,
and that one, and he's like, and he said, "Fuck this." And he's like, and it was fun because I started listening to it. I was driving around during the week, and then I finished it at home watching it like on my TV. Him when he was on Joe Rogan, and it that episode allows him to dive more in depth of like how he came up in this. He's done a lot of interviews, but not like that where it's actually long. It's 2 hours. Yeah. He really goes deep inside of his life and what really influenced him. And he was talking about how like all these record companies were kind of looking at him. He had offers, but he wasn't sure, and he was waiting for Geffen to essentially like contact him, and that's who we wanted to roll with.
Which, like, again, I have to respect and admire that, to be that passionate about something and go, this is the way I see it. This is the company I want to be with. This is the kind of music I want to make, and I feel like they're the best fit. At that point, right, at that age, to be that young and get like 2 or 3 offers from record labels and say no.
It shows his
character. I feel like, I'd probably be fucking dumb enough that if some company offered me some shitty deal, I'd be like, yep, sign me up straight away.
Aaron, we're going to lock you to a 5-year contract where you have to produce the podcast that we want you to produce, but you can't mention anything grotesque or horrible, and you can't swear. It's just like, all right, sure, and then you realize what you got yourself into, and then you're like, fuck, because that's what, it just seemed like what I like about Rob Zombie is he really has a I don't give a shit attitude. I want to do what I want to do, and I'm not going to settle for less.
Yep. And he and this is the thing I always say to people. He is him. Like, it's not the same as Marilyn Manson. Yeah. People from the outside kind of look and go, oh yeah, but he's just trying to be one of those like anarchist kind of dudes. It's like, no, that's just who he is, and he doesn't give a shit who likes it or who doesn't like it. I mean, look at some of the movies he's made. Like, he's obviously not putting these things together and thinking, oh yeah, this is going to release in like 7,000 theaters and I'm going to be like number one. Like, that's not his intention.
Well, and he's talked about too how obviously influenced he was by horror, and how, you know, people like complain about, if I want to go see this movie, I gotta drive how long to get to it, and you know that happens. Even he talked about Canada, right, in Vancouver, and how people in like BC, or like, you know, you're living out close to the mountains, how sometimes they'd have to drive 2-3 hours to get to like a movie premiere of something they'd really like to see. And he said he drove like 5 hours to go see a premiere of this horror movie that he really wanted to see, and he would like seek out these horror movies. And how which I liked about him, which, you know, kids nowadays would never understand, but the whole TV guide thing is he would lay out his whole week of, and it reminds me of that very, you know, that 60s, 70s culture when everyone started to have a TV inside their home, and you kind of, whatever was on TV, you had to watch out for, and you didn't really get to choose. Like nowadays, kids, you get Netflix, Prime, all these different things that most times your parents obviously bought or subscribe as you're a child now growing up, where you have all these options. There's literally horror movies at the wazoo. There's all these crazy movies that you can watch and experience younger and younger, essentially, if you get yourself a hold of the remote. When your parents are maybe away. But back then, it's that he actually like scheduled, okay, I'm going to watch maybe, you know, Frankenstein, Destroy Frankenstein or something like that comes out like this day. And he's like, oh, then, you know, Dracula comes out this day. And then he's like, he figured out how to watch, like, and figure out what movies he want to watch. Or he liked Western films with Clint Eastwood and stuff like that. He would actually like plan out his week around the TV, it sounded like.
Yeah, and I think even to, you know, go a little bit more modern, even to our era, which is why I think, and not to talk down on anybody, but I feel like we have a different understanding for like movies and art and creativity, because you did do that. Like you made the commitment to, okay, this movie is on at this time, and if I'm not here at this time, I don't get to see this movie, and I may not see it again for a long time. So, and same with, you know, videotapes.
Renting,
you would go to, like you would rent a tape, and, you know, you would do it based on, a lot of times I would do it based on the artwork, and there's a lot of times I was like, wow, this movie was terrible, but I sat there for 90 minutes and watched it. Whereas now, I'm even guilty of it. You know, you could say to me now, oh, what are you going to watch later? And I'll go on Netflix and Prime and Shudder and all these different things. I'll look at 10 seconds of 20 movies and then end up watching something that I've seen 200
I
times.
know, and I literally do that exact same thing, where nowadays, because there's so many options, and because we have things like TikTok and stuff like that, where it's shortening our attention span. It is kind of different. And I just looked up this movie Sick. Okay. It's a serial insane clown killer. I remember renting this. Just everyone look up this cover, just look up Sick clown movie. And this was a movie that me and that kid Austin rented, and we watched it in his room with like the lights off, scared shitless. But it was such a low budget shitty movie that we just rented it for the cover. And that's why you had to kind of roll with the dice. You had to be like, hey, is this what I want to watch tonight? I'm going to rent this. And you would sit down and watch it because you paid money for it, or your parents paid money for it. You know, they throw you the $5 for 2 movies. And the generation now doesn't understand that.
No, I've seen this movie.
It's fucking weird, man. It's
but that wasn't called that over here. That was called like Mr. Jingles or Mr. Jangles or something like that.
And you would just,
I swear to God, I've seen this movie.
Covers, which you said before. It's literally true, because we would be like, oh, this looks sick. Even, and I love, you know, talking about horror movies, and I feel like I was going to create a horror podcast, but I said to my fiance, with connecting with you, and because we became so close friends, it's now essentially I can share my love of horror movies and my thought process on certain movies with you in your show. And then it's kind of like we can do this stuff kind of together and collaborate, where I can get some of these thought processes across, because it was so different. I remember like going like these like small town movie rental places, and you just like, I would just, any Friday the 13th movie I would rent because I wanted to watch all of them. Anything that I knew, like any style slasher killer style movie I would rent. And a lot of times it'd just be for the cover. We've talked about it on the Halloween episode. If you look at the covers for like, when we talk about Halloween H2O and Halloween Resurrection, if you look at the cover for even Halloween 4, and it looks so good, and then you watch it, and then it's still good, and it holds merit, but then you see his shitty mask when he's like in Jamie's room and she's having a nightmare, and it's like, whoa, that's not what the cover looked like.
The one that I have behind me on the shelf. And I solely bought that mask. Normally I would try and buy, if I was buying something like that and I was going to spend money, a lot of times I would try and look for it, like, I guess, new out of the box or whatever. And that one I bought secondhand off of somebody, and just because the price was like relatively good, and it always sticks in my mind, like you said about that. Like I remember, I think the first time I ever seen Halloween 4, they were giving it away free with a Sunday paper.
What?
And yeah, like over here, like that's like a thing. We have like the Irish Mirror or the Irish Times and stuff like that, and they don't do it anymore, but before they used to, like, it'd be like special edition or whatever every Sunday. I think it was just like a gimmick to get more people to buy the fucking shit.
That's funny.
And like I have them. I must actually show. I'm gonna take a picture of them later and post it on Instagram. Like they done the entire franchise basically of Halloween every Sunday.
That would be kind of cool though. I would have loved that shit. It's like when you get DVDs and cereal boxes, and most of them are shit, but you still watch them.
Yep. So yeah, I had seen actually in interviews over the years that Rob also mentioned several times that he has like toyed with the idea of getting White Zombie back together.
Really?
I'm actually kind of surprised. Yeah, I'm actually kind of surprised that he didn't, just, I suppose from the standpoint of like, it would probably be a big thing for a little while. But he's never come out outright and said why.
Yeah.
He said he's only talked to one of the band members in the last 15 years. And he said, people don't need to know all the reasons like behind why we don't get back together. But he was like, there is some like legitimate personal reasons that we all can't.
Something must have happened. And I'm sure like, and that's what he says too. In some of his interviews is like, people change, this idea that we're all going to be friends with the same people we were in high school or whatever, if people go to college or any of that shit, is like, it never ends up turning out. People have different lives. People's perspective changed. And they say you change every 5 years. Okay. I'm completely different than who I was in my early 20s comparative now. Like, and I do say, like, I couldn't imagine, like, part of me is like, wish I'd started taking psychedelics when I was younger, because it does shift your personality into being a more, you could say less of an asshole, more of a caring person. But like, I was just like a drunk horror movie loving fucking rapping weirdo when I was in my early 20s and didn't know what the fuck I wanted out of life. And, comparative to now, I'm so different. So I get why he would say that, because people change. He probably changed a lot in the way he thought about things, or the music maybe he wanted to create and where he wanted to go. Because as soon as he started making money, he was probably like, you know what? I want to make a horror movie. And then that's kind of spawned, which like we'll eventually get into why he ended up creating House of 1,000 Corpses and where that idea came from.
Yeah, and so I suppose, they kind of, and it's a strange kind of a story, because it doesn't happen, I don't think, that way that often, but he just kind of came to the conclusion, like, this band has run its course now. We need to kind of just like pack this in. It just doesn't work anymore. And I don't think, at least at the time anyway, I don't think there was anything crazy that had happened where, anybody fell out or anything. It was just a case of like, I think this thing has run its life cycle, and probably ties into what you just said. Everybody's probably changing and probably has different ideas and wants to go in a different direction.
Well, how do you go
so
from
like
fucking one of your bandmates and like, what I mean, being in a relationship with them to like keeping that still together after you guys have parted ways? I'm sure that's fucking hard. Yeah,
like, you can't really find out anything about it, but I'm sure there was probably some shit. Like I can't imagine, you know, being with a chick for 6 or 7 years and being in a band with her, and then we break up and we're not killing each other every night.
And
we're
look at like
probably taking shitloads of alcohol.
well,
and
yeah,
like,
drugs, alcohol, and look at even the fucking Beatles, man. They had to record in separate fucking times at one point. Where it's like, how do you even do that? It's like they would have fucking Paul lay down the guitar or whatever, like, and then it's like John Lennon come in. They literally had to record separately. Which is crazy. So it shows, and maybe they didn't want to do that because there's a lot of people that would do that. They might hate each other. Many bands do this where they're like at each other's throats every recording session, and then you just do it because it's making you guys money, and you don't want to lose that money maker of that band because, you know, people like it, and then causes so many problems. So many bands go through this, I'm sure.
And I have to respect that. I'm sure that, you know, there was probably shit was probably starting to get out of hand, and you have to kind of respect that he was like, you know what, this has been kind of my big break and I don't know what's going to happen next, but I'm willing to walk away.
Yeah. And I was going to look it up.
Again.
Do you know if, like, I'm sure he has, like, if Rob's messed around like LSD or magic mushrooms, because you can see in some of his videos that it's kind of psychedelic. Even that record, look at that one record. Which one's that?
Yeah, I would imagine so. But he's very, you know, he keeps everything very close to his chest. I find.
I know.
And he talks about it in a lot of interviews. He was like, I can't remember who it was that he was being interviewed by. It was I think it was one of the music websites or magazines, and they kept prodding him about like White Zombie and different little things. It was around the time I think he done that Twins of Evil tour with Marilyn Manson a couple of years back, and on one of the shows, I can't remember where they were. I think Manson like cancelled or some shit, or like didn't show up, or something happened backstage, and like Zombie came out on stage and he was like, "Yeah, stupid motherfucker," and all, and he was like bad mouthing. And somebody interviewed him like a couple of days after that, and he was like, "Look, people don't need to know all the reasons behind everything, so just leave it alone.
Yeah.
If you needed to know, you would already know. So don't keep like prodding me about like,
yeah,
just forget about it."
Just a question: do you think that? Do you think nowadays if somebody came out with a band named White Zombie that they would get canceled?
Yeah, probably.
It's just how ridiculous the society we live in now.
I think if either of us tried to be either Rob Zombie or Marilyn Manson right now, it would never, ever, ever happen.
No, and it's just funny how some things
Marilyn Manson
are allowed,
is already,
and then some things are not. Like you can be super over, say, sexualized. Like in retrospect, for people that don't know, there's like a stuff going on in Canada. Like there's a lot of stuff going on in Canada, but in Ontario, where I was talking to Aaron about, this teacher is a man that essentially is a cross-dressing, like he's not I don't think he's trans, but I think it's just a sexual fetish. He's cross-dressing, and he's wearing the biggest prosthetic boobs I've ever seen in my fucking life. And now the students are protesting against it, and like there was like hundreds of students protesting against this. And the students aren't allowed to show their nipples or wear like spaghetti strap dresses. But one of the teachers in shop, they wore these even to shop class, can have literally like where it's like A, B, C, D, E, F, G, F. It's probably like I'm trying to think how big these boobs were. It's like astronomical how big they are.
oh my God, it's absolutely,
it's fucking
like,
so weird, and that's allowed, okay? But you can't, have opinions based on other things, or it gets you canceled, or like you can't be against the narrative or the government, or or have even the question, which we have someone on the podcast Strange Brew that's queer and stuff like that, but you can't even have the question of, is there two genders and stuff like that, and people get all upset. So this idea that music like Rob Zombie, especially in Marilyn Manson, the way they speak about things and how like intelligent they really are, it seems like it couldn't work nowadays because people would get more offended than ever before, even when these people were coming up and people were like, Marilyn Manson sucks his own dicks and kills dogs on stages, and you know what I mean?
Yeah, like I even remember being younger and like I heard that whole thing of like, oh yeah, Marilyn Manson got like his ribs to like suck his own dick and all this shit, and there's a video of it, and he was awake when they done it and all this shit. Like, and look, whatever, I don't know, like I in a way, I'm really happy about it. I'm actually surprised that people like this have managed to survive as long as they have in the world we live in now. But even like up until recently, like there was fucking, wasn't there? Again, this is probably going to be crazy controversial. Wasn't there some fucking bitch that was like, yeah, Marilyn Manson like fucking sexually assaulted me or groomed me, or I felt like he was grooming me? Like,
yeah, and that did happen.
ago.
And the thing is, that's why I made the joke about it. It's like all my heroes and the people I love are fucking predators. And then Billy's like, well, if the shoe fucking fits. I was like, fuck you, because essentially it is weird because like I don't know who to trust. They're all like this whole Me Too movement, and they're like, you know, everyone's got to be believed, but then it's like, how do you know if people are just gold diggers out for, you know, these rich musicians, actors, whatever, money? Like, it's just sad. Like, people like, I like James Franco, but now he's targeted and he could be he may have done something really horrible. And his brother is still in movies, and it's just like, but they're not allowing him to be. And it's like, but how do you know? Like, the whole thing with, you know, quickly in that, even Chris D'Elia, that stand-up comedian, where he was saying he was like messaging all these underage girls, and then he just disappeared for a while, came back and was like just the same guy, and was like, I dealt with it, you know, nothing happened. He talked about what happened, and then he just carried on his life and was like, I'm just gonna keep doing my shit. I've dealt with this.
Like I was a huge Chris D'Elia fan, and I won't lie, when all that shit happened, at first I was like, I don't give a fuck. And then when he came back originally, I wasn't interested in his content, not because I was like, oh, he's some like, you know, child molesting fucking rapist weirdo or anything. It was more like, you know, he talked all this shit about stuff, and then this happens, and you literally just disappear off the face of the earth and hide in hopes that like maybe it goes away. I was like, you should have just been like, yeah, whatever, like just address it or don't address it or whatever. But yeah, like,
I'm not as big as a fan as I used to be now.
Yeah, and again, look, I'm not downplaying victims or anything, but I will say, and without sounding too conspiracy-esque, it is kind of convenient as well, though, that like all these people that are being like outed all have shit tons of money, and a lot of them are people who have been tried to have been cancelled. No,
and it's true. It's very, you could say, and to end it on this point, is kind of hypocritical, or it is interesting if you look at all these people trying to target these celebrities for things they said 10, 20 years ago, or whatever, what they've done, supposedly, because there's no definitive proof of a lot of these things. But the Ghislaine Maxwell trial, we weren't allowed to watch that. There was no camera footage. And then none of the people on the flight, Jeffrey Epstein's flight log, have been looked into or investigated, but they will raid the last president's house, because not a lot of people like Donald Trump, and I'm not saying I like him. I think he's fucking weird, and I think he's part of the problem. But it's still the fact you can't have one thing one way and then not do the more extreme thing is that there was people out there going to Jeffrey Epstein's pedophile island, where I'm sure there's parties and all these crazy things happening, and people even like Trudeau and big time politicians went to this island. And what are they doing there? Why were they doing? What were they doing there? Why was Bill Gates such close to Jeffrey Epstein and the ties to their corporation? So it's like, all right, well, we're going to get this person canceled because they said the N-word fucking 25 years ago. But this huge problem of sex trafficking is not going to be looked into.
And like the easiest way, and I would literally argue this point with fucking anybody. So anyone that's listening, try me.
Yeah.
You're going to cancel Marilyn Manson, right? Okay, he's some like, yeah, fair enough. He's some weird cross-dressing satanic this and that and all the shit that they've spouted about him for like years and years, right? Think about this for a second, right? We're gonna cancel him, but we've got like the Bushes, the Obamas, the royal family, the Clintons. Like, think about all these people, right, who have basically gotten away scot-free with everything. But we had like a 6-week fucking like 24/7 live stream of Johnny Depp and his ex-wife. Like, but think about that. Like, so it's okay for us to like go on about that for weeks and weeks and weeks and watch everything and see all the trial and see everything and constantly like harassing them. But then when there's like these huge like pedophilic sex rings and all out, it's like,
don't say anything. It's so true.
Don't worry about that. Yeah, we're gonna like, yeah, it's just fucked. Yeah. So yeah, he to get back to Rob Zombie.
I knew we'd go off a little bit for this. Everybody that's listening, like,
yeah,
it's gonna happen because he's such a iconic figure, and then it dives into the whole social media and where the direction of music and nowadays has gone, where essentially it's horrible. Not gonna lie, most music on the mainstream media is awful.
It is. Yeah, so from the point, I suppose, they decide to call it quits on the band. I think, and I don't mean this in like a slight way, but I think he probably knew this was coming long before maybe the rest of them did.
I'm sure.
And he had already started work, I think, on his first solo album, and I think that's just the direction he wanted to go in, and like you've got to admire that because, like you said before, he just does whatever the fuck he wants to do.
Do you think his hair smells?
I would imagine
because he's always had dreads,
like
but his dreads don't look like, how like if you have dreads long enough, and I know Jamaican do stuff like that, essentially your hair starts falling out, like you start to go like bald, kind of like. Even Marley was, I feel like, getting there, but he was also getting sick. But like he's had like those raspy ass, I don't know if that's a good thing to say, but like dreads for like his whole fucking career.
Yeah, I know, right? And like
it still looks pretty good too, even on the Joe Rogan interview.
Yeah, like his hair looks quite full for a dude that's in his 50s. Like
I'm jealous. I wish I could.
And
do
it's
that.
funny because then you see someone like fucking Lil Wayne who looks like me if I had fucking dreads right now, where his hairline is like back on the back of his head.
It looks so bad. Like his hair's like. That's what I was wondering. I was like, because I knew a dude with dreads growing up, like some white kid, and this is like he never showered. Like he never showered his hair. Like he showered it, like probably his body and stuff like that, but he never like washed his hair. And I'm like, that's fucking gross, man. Like, can you not grow mold on your head and shit?
Yeah, because I think there's a whole process, isn't there, when you have dreads to actually washing them and how you have to do it.
Or you ruin them, essentially. You have to cut them off. And most times you have to cut them off. When you want to get rid of them, it's not like you cannot do it. You have to literally shave your head.
Yeah, like you can't just be like, I'll just undo my dreads.
I'm sure that fucking Rob Zombie's wife just like cleans his hair every day.
I love her as well. I had such a big crush on her for a long, long, long time.
I can see that. I feel like you like a little bit of the crazy.
Yes. yeah. That's right up my alley. So his first solo album, now I'm going to butcher this, right? His first solo album, Hellbilly Deluxe, 13 Tales of Cadaverous, Cavorting.
Cadavering?
Inside the Spook Show International. So he released that. It's probably his it's just random, like fucking doesn't really make sense to me, but
a lot of his albums are like that, where they're like this very like old school horror movie poster style, where it's like, welcome to the creepiest show on earth. It's just like it's very long title. It reminds me quickly of there's a Jedi Mind Tricks, one of my favorite hip hop groups. They've got an interesting story as well, but one of their first album they really released, and this was like in high school shit, slanging tapes. It was called The Psychosocial Chemical Biological Manipulation of Human Consciousness. It was based on a book by Val Valerian, literally. And then Vinny Paz is talking about it. He's like, in retrospect, he's like, we thought it was cool, but he was like, it's a fucking huge name for an album.
But you know what, though? I kind of like that. I like when people just go for what they feel, and like it's so unique because it's so easy now. It's like you said about music earlier. Like I feel like I never listen to the radio, but there's sometimes like my phone is dead or something and I'm driving. I can't. After a while of sitting there in silence, I'm like, oh, let me put the fucking radio on.
Yes, baby,
like
baby,
song,
baby. Oh.
Yeah, like every song, right? So it's like Cardi B, Nicki Minaj, Megan Thee Stallion, they're all the same person.
They are.
Like,
they all sound the exact same. It's all about look at my ass and my pussy is so wet. Fucking shit.
And it's just like so fucking, I'm like, this is so old to me. Yeah, so he's had multiple solo albums since. So you've got Hellbilly Deluxe, which is the short version. That's probably his best work.
Sure.
There's the Sinister Urge, Educated Horses, Hellbilly Deluxe 2.
What was Educated Horses about? What, I don't get that name. When I was looking up his albums, and I was like, weird, I've never even heard of that album. I was like,
Yeah.
strange name.
I don't know what some of it is about. You have Venomous Rat Regeneration Vendor. The Electric Warlock Acid Witch Satanic Orgy Celebration Dispenser.
That one is fucking really deep.
And yeah, that one's wild. And then his latest album, which came out a couple of years ago, is the Lunar Injection Kool-Aid Eclipse Conspiracy.
Like what? It's like I want to talk to you. Like, what did you mean by that? Like, what was your what are you smoking or taking? Like to like that's why I feel like I was like, hey, are you doing like acid or like mushrooms or who knows, maybe microdoses or whatever he does, but like. Or drinking and you're sitting down like, okay, this sounds good. The Liquid Melting Man of Mentoon. It's just like so random.
Yeah, he and it is. It's like it's wild. He I just pulled out some of the names of songs that I was like, you would definitely like. It kind of ties into what we talked about. He would get cancelled immediately if you tried to do this nowadays.
Yeah,
but like. Here's some, just to give people the context, maybe if you're not familiar with his work, here's some of his song titles, if you haven't heard of, obviously he has the famous ones, but here's some of the other song titles that like I feel like you probably wouldn't get away with now. So you have Perversion 99, Demonoid Phenomena, Teenage Nosferatu Pussy.
What?
Grease Paint and Monkey Brains.
I kind of like that one.
El Phantasmo and the Chicken Run Blastorama.
But what does that mean? What is that like? It doesn't even like. I don't understand what. Like why?
Like, no.
Like he's like, can I just name this the weirdest shit? Like to me, I'm like, you have to be on some sort of drug to think of some of these names. Where it's just like, or your brain is just fucking he's on a weird frequency. I'm sure.
Yeah, because. In a lot of ways, it just sounds like somebody just like picked like a shit ton of words and just went, yeah, put them all in.
Chicken fucker necromancy fuckhead. It's like,
yeah. That's literally what it sounds
like. It's like throwing random words out. Super beast.
So yeah, then I just wanted to, I suppose, touch lightly then on some of my favorite songs, and obviously people are probably going to have the crazy eye roll because it's the songs that everybody likes. Living Dead Girl, Super Beast is another really good song by him. Dragula, obviously, everybody knows that. He has a song with Marilyn Manson that came out more recently called Helter Skelter.
I've yet to listen to that, and I am a big, I would say I'm not a big fan, but I'm extremely interested by the Manson family, and we'll eventually be covering that in Strange Brew podcast. It's going to be a huge episode, like probably one of the biggest things we'll do, considering I'm so interested by Marilyn Manson. And if for some reason me, you, and Anton end up doing it, I told Anton, I was like, this is one we'll have to do maybe even a 3-part, 2-parter, and really talk about the idea of what happened, their mindset, because Charles Manson will forever be in the social subconsciousness of like this maniac, interesting character, like, whoa, man, I'm a fucking Spider-Man. Like, it's just like very crazy. And a lot of musicians, specifically ones that were influenced by horror, bring him up constantly. Yeah,
and Rob Zombie cites him as an influence for some things that we'll get into in a second.
I want to wait to dive into that because you can clearly see it.
Yeah. And that's what's coming up next now in a second. But he has a Spook Show Baby is another quite good song by him. How to Make a Monster, and the House of a Thousand Corpses song is actually really good, which was released before the movie ever came out.
I'll have to check that out.
It's and you'll know it like as soon as once you've seen the movie. It's cut into the credits, I think, when you have all that weird imagery. It's the song playing. Which I always thought was quite good. So a lot of people don't know, before we get into, I suppose, his first movie, a lot of people don't actually know that he was supposed to make his directorial debut with The Crow 2037. And he also wrote the script for that as well, which is actually online. You can
What do you mean, like The
read
Crow?
his script. Yeah, like the Crow franchise.
What? Really?
He had written and was supposed to direct an entry into that franchise.
That's pretty interesting.
And it was all like, yeah, it was all due to go ahead. And then I think once things started to get more serious, I think Universal, whoever it was, were like, actually, maybe this doesn't fit within the universe we want to build out. So we're just going to like cut it. So while he was, I think, going around like Universal Studios and like he was in and out of the offices and stuff, he got pulled into the actual theme park side of it, and he helped design some attractions for Universal Hollywood. And he's actually mentioned, so the guy who's the creative director for Halloween Horror Nights Hollywood, John Murdy is his name. He's he has, I don't know if it's his family are Irish or his wife's family, but he actually lives in Ireland a lot of the year. So he'll fly out there and they'll do the event, and then he'll fly back and live in Ireland. And he cites Rob Zombie as basically like the main reason that Halloween Horror Nights got revived and became so popular in Hollywood.
That's fairly cool. And like, just even the mention of Crow, that might even be something to I've always wanted to talk about that movie, so that might even come down the docket, because it could fit into a Famous Dead episode for Strange Brew Podcast, one of these series that we do, talking about people that were famous and died. Because Brandon Lee's story and his father it's fucking weird, man.
Yep.
There's some weird shit behind that. And of course, like, I'm sure Rob was interested by the entire story because it's one of those like cursed films.
Yeah, wild. I think that's actually a really good idea for.
I know, we guys are like fucking having
really
it, writing this shit down on like a fucking post-it note.
I know, yeah. It'd be a long ass post-it note.
Sure.
Yeah, so during the time he was around Universal, he got close to several executives, and I think that was how he initially got work on his first film. He was, I think the house he was creating for Halloween Horror Nights was actually titled House of a Thousand Corpses, and that was the title he came up with. And then I don't know how, but he got himself into some conversation over lunch or something with somebody, and they were like, "Oh, pitch me a movie that you've got an idea for." And he was like, "Yeah, well, it's called House of a Thousand Corpses as well." And then he was just like making shit up on the spot. And the dude was like, "I like the sound of this." He was like, "Have you got a treatment?" And he was like, "Yeah, sure, I'll bring it in tomorrow." And he went home that day and wrote like a 15-page outline, just completely winging it.
I wish I lived
and was
that
like, "There you
life,
go."
man. Part of me is like, I wish I could just like, someone could be like, "Hey, you got an idea for a horror movie? Let's just run with it." And I'm like, "All right, I'll fucking give me a week and I'll make something that's fucking super strange."
And like he talks about that. He's like, "I didn't realize till years and years after that that's not really how it works."
Yeah.
You know, he was like, "I was actually quite lucky in a lot of ways." He was like, "I kind of just assumed that it was as simple as like, oh yeah, no, I can make a movie," and someone says, "Okay, make it."
Yeah, and how he said the process of making movies is so far different than music because it's a lot more money put into it.
Yeah. And then obviously, I suppose the more money you've got put in there,
The more money you got to make.
the more, and then the more people get involved and like want to give their opinion. Excuse me. The movie actually when it was done was supposed to originally release in 2001, I think, but Universal basically just dropped it. They were like, "This is like too excessively violent." I think it was put through the rating system 8 times.
It's crazy.
And they couldn't get anything lower than I don't really understand the US rating system. So like rated R is whatever it is, but then NC-17.
NC-17 is like
I don't
almost like fucking, I would say like softcore porn almost, where you could show a lot of tits and stuff and ass.
Okay, so that's worse than rated R.
Yeah, and then there's X, I think, and that's like just. Yeah,
Fucked.
like and you think about how different. Like I remember, I've mentioned too that, and I'd like to eventually dive deeper into it when on some sort of rant episode or something like just about that babysitter. And he would her boyfriend, this babysitter, her boyfriend was super into horror movies, influenced me a lot. And he was talking about like Italy and how Italy didn't have a rating system, so they could produce the most fucked up horror movies ever because they didn't really have a rating system, so they could literally make like a bloody ass porno movie and like show it on like a theater.
Yeah. So yeah, I suppose this is the time now we're gonna get into his first movie, which again, every time I say that, it's just mind blowing to me because I love it so much and I feel like it's so fucking wild. It's so, and I think even more so now when you look at this, you have to appreciate how original.
Yeah, for sure. But and that's what I was gonna say as we're getting into this now. You can really see. Like, you can really see how he was influenced by the Manson family, like 100%. Obviously, you got the elements of Texas Chainsaw Massacre that I'm sure that Hooper was taking some of the notes and ideas from some sort of backcountry fucked up family. And I feel like because it was in Hollywood and stuff like that, the Manson family murders forever changed the world or the United States or cinema or Hollywood and stuff like that. And you can see his influence. And most of all, I would say with the family, but most of all with Otis, he is some sort of Charles Manson character.
He is essentially Charles Manson. And I did toy with the idea of pulling a lot of his audio because he has some, which is, I guess, twofold. Amazing on the part of Rob Zombie because I feel like he's a fucking genius at writing dialogue, and Bill Moseley is one of the best character actors I think I've ever seen, along with Sid Haig, who played Captain Spaulding. Otis is essentially, in my mind, Charles Manson.
I am the devil, and I am here to do the devil's work.
And that sounds like something that I'm pretty sure Charles Manson said something like that. We're like,
I
write something witchy. There's a lot of Charles Manson quotes that very much remind me of Otis's character. I've existed in places you couldn't even dream of. That type of like, it's just crazy. You can see the influence 1,000%.
Yeah, I think they ripped this one directly from Charles Manson, actually.
Hoss, if I'm not mistaken, I think I could still smell your wife's pussy stink out my gun.
Definitely sounds like something he would say. And he's like this, and the way their character is styled is very familiar, where it's just like he's just overboard, kind of crazy, and give a shit attitude. This is who I am, and how you've noticed that because Charles Manson was in and out of jail a lot of his life, that he was just like, he just accepted his fate and just accepted kind of the life he was living. He like knew almost like he wanted to go somewhere, but didn't know where he wanted to go.
And do you know what's wild about this? I've obviously, with this being one of my favorite movies ever, I've done a lot of like research looking for behind the scenes and interviews and stuff that's not on the DVDs and Blu-rays. And Bill Moseley actually talks about how much attention he got from women.
Really?
While playing the character of Otis, and apparently when they would do conventions and stuff, like chicks would be like fucking dead nuts for him. And I think that ties into again the Charles Manson thing. Like he's like scummy and like obviously psychotic, but also kind of charming and like has this weird like kind of sex appeal, much like if you look at anything about like the Night Stalker.
Yeah, he had the women in black.
This weird like sex.
Yeah,
he's like fucking like stabbing, murdering, like raping women and shit. But then there's like women that want to like get married.
Yeah, there was the famous thing where it was like a lot of chicks and they all dressed in black and would show up outside of the jail that Richard Ramirez was at. And this has happened with many serial killers. And it's like, I just find him charming. It's just like, if you were in the room with him for like 3 minutes, you would smell his disgusting breath and you'd probably feel the aura of horror because like he just, because of his presence. But the thing is, it's like, is that a turn on for some people? Like, and I guess I can get it because there's men out there that like crazy ass chicks. You know what I mean? So it's just like this idea of like, oh, well, I want to fix him, but like, I also find him so interesting. That's why you have like that in a lot of horror movies. There's certain ones where you have like a therapist interested by a crazy person. You know, you could even just equate Harley Quinn to that, right? She's interested by the Joker and how nuts he is, and then she becomes just as crazy, if not crazier, than he is.
Yeah, and there's definitely, like, I suppose, aspects of that, and you can see it here with the family and stuff, the dynamic there that they have.
Yeah, it's crazy.
So, for anybody who doesn't know, this movie was written, directed, and co-scored actually by Rob Zombie himself. The plot centers around a group of friends who are kidnapped and tortured by a psychotic family while traveling across country, writing a book about crazy roadside attractions that they come across. When at the start of the movie, they hear about a local legend of Dr. Satan, and they go on a journey to find him. And then it just kind of, in a way, I don't want to, like, I know the movie is, 20 years old or whatever. I don't want to ruin it for people, though, because I feel like if you're able to go into this movie with no real knowledge of what it's about, it's so fucking wild. Like, anybody who's looking at the video right now, some of these images here should kind of explain how strange and, like, random this movie is, but I feel like it works as well, because the world he builds, you're kind of like, none of this makes sense, but it also makes sense to me that it doesn't.
And it is like, oh my, like, so reminiscent of like serial killers and true crime and stuff like that, because even Otis's character, and you know, we don't hopefully don't want to spoil it too much for people that may have never seen this for some strange reason. You just never end up you know, watching this movie. But I feel like it was a big thing when it came out, and everyone kind of was talking about it. I had a lot of friends that were like, shit, have you seen House of 1,000 Corpses? And we're just like preteens. But this idea of, like, you have Otis with the cheerleaders, like, essentially chained up, and, you know, he's keeping them hostage, very reminiscent of people like Ariel Castro. But you also have this vibe of, like, Ted Bundy-esque stuff too. It's very, like... Rob Zombie really hit the nail on the head when it came to creepy serial killer vibe.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, you know, if you look on screen here right now, you've got so many different personalities and, like, styles of characters. And funny, actually, a lot of people don't know this. This is only half the characters that were actually created. A lot of them were cut completely. There's a cut of this movie apparently that was edited, and it was like over 2 hours long and had way more characters and way more members of the family, like the extended family. And Rob came out a couple of years ago and he was like, I have tried over the last 15 years to try and find this footage and find that edit, and he was like, unfortunately, I don't think we're ever going to see it.
It sucks
like,
that because when the producers get hold of it, and then it's like their property, and it just kind of ruins some of these things. And, like, you have some of these characters too, like the old man. Is he supposed to be the dad, or is he like the uncle?
Yeah, so that's like he's called Grandpa Hugo.
I hate that. I genuinely don't like his character. Like, okay, I like his character because it creeps you out, but, like, I don't like his character because it creeps me out. Like, he spits food and shit, and it's just, like, very, like, cranky. And his character is great. I'm just saying that I don't like it because it just unnerves me a bit.
Yeah, he has this weird, like, I guess you could liken it to that, like, Texas Chainsaw feel, but, like, like you said, he's doing this, like, there's a scene where he's doing this, like, comedy.
Yeah, he's, like, spitting everywhere.
Routine. Yeah, and there's, like, shit coming out of his mouth, and there's, like, stuff in between his teeth, and he keeps doing this really weird, like, he's, like, keeps talking about pussy and, like, eating pussy, and then he'll scream out of nowhere. He'll, like, scream into the microphone.
It's so bizarre.
Yeah, it's so wild. The original script, actually, which I have read, it's free online for anybody who is interested in it. If you look up the House of 1,000 Corpses script, you're looking for the one that's revised sometime in the year 2000. It'll be written in the title. So originally, he was supposed to be Dr. Satan.
Oh, weird.
Yeah, and... the whole idea was there wasn't actually a real Dr. Satan at all. He would just kind of play that role, and the family created that whole story as a way to, like, lure people in with a local legend. and then they would use that then to kidnap him and torture him and shit. And I think
Dr. Satan! Ah, Dr. Satan! Maybe he lives next door to you.
My buddy, that Austin kid, was like, and he's just someone that I grew up with that was a really close friend that we always watch horror movies together. And the kid's like fucking maybe 11 or 12, and he's like, Dr. Satan, Dr. Satan. And he would always do that shit. And like, this is one of those kids that would reference movies like so often. He'd always scream that we're walking around like the streets as kids.
I was like really bad for referencing these movies in particular, because at the time when I saw them, like I was young enough as well that like a lot of the language and like things that were referenced in this were still a bit like taboo to me. So I was like, wow, there's so much like bad language. There's so much this, there's so much that. I was like, this.
What'd you think of the mom?
You know what? Right, when I was younger, I was like, whew, unreal. But then I didn't realize, I don't think until subsequent years, how yellow her fucking.
Oh, I know. And I'm like, I wonder if it was like that set up that way, or is that what she actually looks like?
I hope not, because they are fucking
gnarly.
vile. Like they're like it's not like yellow, like you would. It's like a weird like mustard.
Yeah, they made all the characters like tiny. Man, that character in general is just, and that actor, like he's been in a couple things, but man, it's just creepy. Like he did a good job as this, like, you always have the one. It sounds bad, everybody. I'm sorry, but that one like retarded character. Like in horror movies that do with like backwood families. Like look at fucking Wrong Turn. Okay, those are like hillbillies, but they're mentally unstable, first of all, but they also like, I don't know how else to fucking label it, as like kind of like they're just retarded. They have deformities, and I know people hate me using that word. I've already been called an ableist, but it is like this crazy. Oh, it's a trope that's in these movies with families. Creepy families.
Yeah, I mean, and it is what it is. There's a scene actually with Tiny when he's eating, I think something like fucking Cheerios or something in a bowl, and it's so fucking weird. The shit is like falling out of his mouth, and like there's like milk going down.
I don't like that scene. There's so many scenes in this movie that do make me uncomfortable, but I still enjoy it for what it is. You know, like you have to be a real horror fan to get this.
Yeah, for sure. So a little bit of backstory. The character of Tiny is actually so later on in the movie, when we see like Dr. Satan's lair, you see the professor, which is the guy with the red weird skin with the goggles and the mask on. His name is Earl Firefly, and he's actually Tiny's dad.
And they never showed his character, or?
Yeah, they never. You see the professor, but you don't really know anything about him. You know the dude towards the end with the big axe. Yeah, that dude.
That's supposed to be his father.
He's Tiny's dad, and apparently he was fucked up. And the reason Tiny ended up like that was because his dad threw petrol on him and lit him on fire.
Oh, and I feel like they reference that, do they not?
They do, yeah, slightly, but apparently there was a whole like backstory there that you would have gotten, and there was a reason that Dr. Satan and the professor lived in those tunnels and not with the family anymore.
It's such a crazy fucking movie.
It is. It's so wild. Like, I mean, even look at Rainn Wilson there up in the top corner as Fish Boy.
I know, it's
like,
that part.
It's so
okay, I want to also get into quickly. I want to mention earlier we were talking about Otis, Bill Moseley, right? He does. That's the guy's name. He also reminds me of, you ever seen Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2? Chop Top, yeah.
That's him.
I thought so, man. I was like, is that not Bill Moseley? Isn't Bill Moseley plays Chop Top?
Yep, that's him.
What? Oh, now I can hear it in his voice. I just thought he was maybe too young. But I guess, like, if you look back at that movie, I actually want to do a commentary on that movie because I got some stuff to say about it when I watched it as a kid. I got some stuff to say. But like,
I love that.
I heard that Bill Moseley was, is he not, did I not hear this, that he's religious, that he's like Christian?
Potentially.
I swear to God, I watched something or some documentary that said that I think it was the Text Change or the Devil's Rejects extra content on the DVD. And I swear, because I feel like I watched the whole like doc a bit, so somewhat whatever special features it had, and it mentioned that he was religious and he was Christian, and to say some of these lines, "I'm the devil here to do the devil's work," all this stuff, it disturbed him almost like to his core because he is religious.
I am the devil.
I feel like
And I am here to do the devil's work.
Yeah, you might be right with that. What are your thoughts, I guess, before we move on from House of a Thousand Corpses? Because I could talk about
me too.
this
Which it might
for
come
hours
for a
and
Patreon
hours.
or something, or
It's such a fucking, oh my God, it's such a good movie. But I still do actually, Baby
yeah.
in that movie. And that scene where Rainn Wilson is sitting on the couch and she like comes in with popcorn and she has that little like, I don't know what it is, but her ass crack is hanging out.
I know,
Dude.
that got me going.
When I was young.
And I'm watching this shit when I'm like 12, and I'm having, certain thoughts where it's like there's so many horror movies that like, oh, you're also feeling the tinglies in your balls, but then all of a sudden it changes scenes to someone getting their fucking head cut off or their boobies sliced up. It's just like those movies like watching 13 Ghosts when I was a preteen and being like, okay, those are big boobies, but they're all cut up and I don't know if I like it or not. And it's just like some of these movies that like you watch when you're a kid, they invoke these memories of like, okay, well, I don't understand if this is turning me on or not. And her character, the very like crazy, ditzy, flirtatious, but just psychotic character, really does play on these weird thoughts, especially as when we were both probably preteens watching this.
And also, so the scene with Fish Boy, in the longer cut of the movie, you actually got to see that being made, and it was like apparently it was super graphic, like super gory. Anybody that's seen that cut was like, that you have to get that out.
They should fucking, I hate that they do
vile.
that. Like, they released the Snyder cut of fucking Justice League and it was 1,000 times better. It was 4 hours, but I actually genuinely liked that movie and that they allowed Zack Snyder to redo it and do the cut he wanted to. And it was fucking way better than what fucking Joss Whedon did. So it's like, sometimes you have to like keep these edits, not lose them, and allow them to go out into, and even if, you make people pay for it, or you just put it out for free and allow people to enjoy something and people can choose if they want to watch this or not, type of thing.
Yeah, and I do think that he's kind of campaigned to try and find it for years and years. After Universal passed on the movie originally, and it was kind of left on the shelf, he went back then, and obviously at the time, he was with Sherry Moon, who plays Baby. He went back, and in their basement in the house they lived in at the time, they went down and got like a shitty like handheld camera, and that's when they recorded all those scenes where she's like masturbating with the skeleton.
Yeah, so fucked.
All that weird shit. Which again, that ties into. Do I
know.
them?
And well, it's
like
it's
I
like
do.
uncomfortable, but like weird, and that's why like these, and I think that's what he was trying to invoke from people, especially like either way, people can not like Sherry or whatever you want to say, but I don't know. She plays that character so well. It was literally like made for her. This psychotic ditzy, like, oh, I could fuck her, but she might chop off my dick afterwards.
Yeah, like she kind of made me feel like this actually.
Although once he got caught, with a Planet of the Apes doll stuck up his asshole.
That's a little clip from House of a Thousand Corpses. If those little audio clips, I wish I could play more and we didn't get copyrighted. But I think in recent years, Lionsgate have realized how valuable this movie and merchandising and stuff is for it still 20 years later. So we'll get fucked, but like there's so much good dialogue, there's so much good interactions with characters. And I mean, if you look at it now, and this again is a sign of all these people who were quite passionate. I mean, you've got Bill Moseley in the movie, who's like really well known. You have Rainn Wilson, who went on to be like fucking huge. Sherry Moon, look, she's Rob Zombie's wife, whatever. Chris Hardwick plays that dude that does the Dr. Satan.
Fucking Dr. Satan. He's decently famous.
Yeah. Yeah, he's like wildly famous. And he's also the dude, I think, who is getting his brain operated on by Dr. Satan at the end. There's an image there.
See, and I want to say one more thing. The way that this direction of this film goes is interesting because I remember when I was first viewing it, when I was a kid, it's just like, oh, cool, creepy. It's in this house. It's this crazy family. And then it goes very quickly to this run, rabbit. And then like they're out in the woods and it becomes like this satanic, like ritual kind of style movie. It's not even, it switches from this, like you're in this house and all these crazy serial killers. And then it's like as soon as it switches where she's in that outfit and they get them all run, it is, it switches the tone of the movie, I feel like.
And I seen people reference it as this a lot of times, and I definitely think it's the best way to sum it up. It does kind of feel like a fever dream. Like, I think you will come out the other side of it going, did I just watch that? Or did I like make that up in my head? Or was that actually a real movie I watched? I mean, you know, there's a scene where Baby talks about giving, I think, Chris Hardwick's character a haircut or some shit, and she's like cutting his scalp off or some shit.
It's fucked.
And like there's, you know, that scene that you talked about earlier of Otis with the cheerleaders and stuff, and some of the rants and the speeches.
Oh, I know, and how it's filmed too.
It's unbelievable. Like, it's actually incredible how good that movie is.
Yeah, I know. And even like, you know, we kind of just a little bit mentioned, but you know, even like the whole idea of Spaulding and stuff was a pretty crazy character. And obviously this is a clip from fucking Devil's Rejects that we'll get into. But
what's the matter, kid? Don't you like clowns? Why? Don't we make you laugh? Aren't we fucking funny? You best come up with an answer, because I'm going to come back here and check on you and your mama. If you ain't got a reason why you hate clowns, I'm going to kill your whole fucking family.
You'd be like, fucking Christ, man. That character, and I think it's good to bring us into the Devil's Rejects.
Which, again, like, is another, I think, an incredible follow-up.
So
complete
different.
Tone.
So different.
Yeah, a complete tonal shift, but also like the same in a lot of ways. It was again written, produced, and directed by Zombie. The movie follows Baby, Cutter, who is also Captain Spaulding, and Otis as they're on the run after a huge shootout at the Firefly.
Oh, that
hideout.
beginning is fucking dope, man. Very cool, very reminiscent of Texas Chainsaw Massacre style movies, which I feel like there was a Texas Chainsaw movie that totally ripped that off.
Was it Texas Chainsaw 3D,
I think,
maybe? Where they had that scene at the start where all the dudes show up in like the trucks.
Ripped. It totally was a ripoff of Rob Zombie's idea, which he probably got from other things. But that beginning, and I've seen Devil's Rejects a lot, but I do feel like I should have revisited before we did this, because there's so many scenes in that movie that are fucked, and the beginning's crazy, and you see like, and then there's that cop. Like, there's so many things about this movie that are like, also it can stand alone as its own film too.
Which is what I love about it. There's little tie-ins there for people who know the lore and who are interested in that, but you could also just watch this movie without ever having seen House of a Thousand Corpses. Yeah, they're being hunted in the movie by Sheriff John Quincy Wydell.
Yeah, that fucking guy.
And he like announces himself as that. There's a shit ton of iconic and like cult moments in this again. And it takes a way more serious approach in a lot of ways. I think it really kind of starts to lean into like that weird like Manson family-esque,
yes, very much so,
kind of thing. Like Otis is like unhinged in this one. And I don't know, I feel like they're way more like graphic and kind of vile.
Yeah, especially like the hotels, the motel, not hotel, motel, but the motel scenes and stuff like that. And one thing that always got me in this film too was the cutting off of the chick's boyfriend, and then they like strap his face to her, and like then she's running. It's fucking so fucked.
It is, yeah. That's fucking wild. That used to terrify me. And again, that motel scene you mentioned, and like people are probably going to think I should be like committed, but I remember seeing that when I was quite young and being like, ooh, titties not. I'm like, what weird though. She's like, this is like against her will.
I also had the same
this is, like,
feeling. We are very
uncomfortable.
similar on a lot of things that we think, but it's okay. You might say I'm fucking crazy, but essentially, it was just I was young because this. I feel like I saw House of Thousand Corpses when I was like 11, maybe 12, and then this came out and I watched it. And I was like, I would think even 13. Like I watched it as like when it first came out with that same buddy Austin, and because he's like making her do things, but you're feeling weird feelings, and that's why you got to be careful of kids watching. I watched horror movies way too young. But also, it didn't necessarily change me, but I think it did fuck up my mind slightly. That's why you have to be careful. But also, teaching. Well, my parents, like my mom, when I was like 8, I had all these horror movies, all these VHSs, Scream, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Blade, all this stuff, and she took them away because she thought that I was like kind of like maybe going crazy or something like that. Where she took away all my horror movies, and I wasn't able to get them back. I don't think she ever gave them back to me. But I've seen there's like the kid named Horror Steve, and the kid's like fucking 8, and he wears a mask and stuff like that, and he's very like famous on Instagram, and the kid's like super young and into horror films. But almost you need to show your kid, hey, it's just make believe, this is not real. But also be careful with the way you show them because it could create some sort of monster in their mind. But essentially, if you convince your kid or like at least show them, hey, these are just movies. This stuff does exist in reality, but this is fake. It could be a good thing. It could also be a bad thing. But I know there is parents out there that show their kids horror movies very young, and their kid turns out fine. So,
yeah, and I feel like as well in our era, we probably had a lot less context as well. And not to sound like, back in my day, things were, everything was way cheaper and everything was better. I don't mean that, but I do feel like that in a way back then, shit seemed like way more scary, and it was like there was less, I suppose, avenues for us to even figure out if something was real or fake. Like I remember seeing Candyman when I was super young, and like being genuinely like fucking horrified and like convinced. And it was funny because maybe about 6 or 7 years ago I had the chance to interview Tony Todd. He was at a horror event in Dublin, and we done a ghost bus tour throughout the city, where they went through like all the haunted places in Dublin City. And I remember telling him that story, and like look, at the time, like I was like, he's gonna think I'm a fucking like nerd. And to see his reaction, like I could tell he was like, I'm not saying like super interested, but he was like, that's actually really bizarre that somebody from like 8,000 miles away saw my performance in a movie and felt like that for years. I was like, I like at one point I remember being convinced that if I said Candyman into the mirror, that
he would show up,
that this thing could actually potentially be real.
That's very funny. Every time we talk, I'm like, wow, we're like too much alike. Me and that fucking Austin kid, because me and him were always the one that watched movies together. And then I started to realize that I like being scared and in fear, but in control. Like watching horror movies, the same idea where it's like scaring your friends. Nothing's gonna happen. We dress up, scare each other, stuff like that. Remember we watched Candyman. The tone of Candyman, eventually, if you ever want to talk about it, is very creepy. That piano riff that's throughout the film, and we would actually go into the washroom after the film, turn off the lights, and say Candyman. We'd say it like 3-4 times, and then be like, no, we can't say it anymore. And we did this a couple times. And we literally thought that if we said it enough, and this is another film we probably saw when I was like 10 or 11, that he was gonna show up in our mirror. Some black fellow with a hook on his hand is gonna come out and fucking slay our throats.
Yeah, I can definitely agree with that. I was exactly the same, and I would always tempt fate as well with these things. I would always kind of like, I suppose, be like shit scared, but also kind of pushing it a little bit
that's
as
what
well.
I did with
to
Ouija. That's why
like,
Ouija was so fucking young and shit like that, which should definitely be another episode for our time, because I would actually like to talk, and there's, everything we got in the docket, there's so many things that we can do between the two podcasts going forward, but I would love to talk about the new Candyman.
Oh yeah, for sure. I actually have one of the screen used candies.
Oh, that's sick. I thought it was very well
that
done.
The dude comes out through the wall with. Yeah, I really enjoyed it. So I suppose to get back to this, we'll cap things off with this movie. Yeah, again, another just like fantastic movie. So many
I
good
know.
performances. Danny Trejo is amazing. Like he's only in it for 2 seconds, but he's like really good. Diamond Dallas fucking Page is in it as a
Yep.
bounty hunter. He's
Fucking
really good. Otis is
Danny
amazing,
Trejo.
obviously. Yeah, he's really good again. Like fits the bill perfectly.
The sheriff does an
Um,
amazing
and
job.
yeah, and it's kind of weird because at one point I kind of feel like that I was like kind of rooting for the Devil's Rejects.
So it makes you, that's what you even said about the film.
it-
Is like these films, like even Through from Hell, where like you want the bad guys to win.
Yeah, which is kind of a strange, considering that it's not just like a bad guy, you know, like a Michael Myers where it's like, oh, a dude in a mask. Like these are like people that like you're hearing their thoughts and they're like telling people what they're going to do to them, and they're doing like a lot of like fucking like weird shit. I can't remember the guy's name. Is it Ken Foree who plays Captain Spaulding's brother, black dude?
Oh yeah, that guy's
And
fucking
they show
awesome
up to like
too.
he's so
And he's in
good.
Halloween too. Where he's taking the shit.
Yeah. He's another really good actor as well, a really good character actor. But even the scene where they show up at like his ranch
I
or
gotta
whatever it
rewatch
is,
this again. I haven't seen this in a bit.
and I tried to pull the audio clip, but just how well it actually feels like that they're brothers. Like he walks out and he's like, I know that's not that stupid, smelly motherfucking cunt of a brother that I've gotten all, because I swore if I ever saw that dumb motherfucker again, I'd shoot. He'd be a dead motherfucker and all this stuff. And like the baby is like, what the fuck is going on? And he's like, just relax, just go on, whatever he says. And then like he pulls a shotgun on the three of them, and they put their hands up, and Otis is like, you bring us down here, and this prick pulls a gun on us. And then Captain Spaulding's like, he turns to the two of them and he's like, just do what he says, because he's a crazy pig fucking. And
The
like
whole
just that
dialogue
whole
is
like
fucking
all
strange.
like all the interactions are just like so good. Like, and even that clip you played where you know, Captain Spaulding's talking about the special clown business and all, it's just so well
I know,
acted.
and he's like, in talking to the mom and shit, like it's so creepy and it's everything. I feel like is so well done, and because Rob allowed it to, like, it's like he had a vision and he wanted to do this correctly. And even like the scene that always got me too is like when the sheriff finds his like brother's head or whatever, like from, it's so fucked because essentially now the sheriff's hunting down them because they killed his brother. Isn't it during the shootout kind of thing, or just before the shootout?
No, so
I can't remember.
and this was one of the, like, I guess, loose ties. So do you remember the scene in House of a Thousand Corpses where the dad and the cop show up to the house? And Otis, there's a scene where Otis stands over him while he's on his knees for like maybe 30 seconds where nothing happens. It looks like the movie's frozen.
Oh yeah.
And he blows the cop's head off. No, sorry, it's not him that shoots that cop. There's a bald cop that shows up to the door of the Firefly house in House of Thousand
the younger
Corpses,
dude?
and the mother.
Yeah.
Yeah, the mother blows his
remember
fucking
that.
brains out, and that's Sheriff Wydell's brother, and that's how like they tied it all together. Because there is a scene, I think, where he's like, I think it's where he captures them and he's stapling pictures to their chests, and I think I can't remember who, if it's Otis or Captain Spaulding, is like, oh yeah, when we killed your fucking brother and all, he was a bitch too, and all this
just
stuff.
taunting
And like
him.
the sheriff's like going fucking like crazy.
Yeah, and it's just, this movie is so well done when it comes to like the nuances, you could say, of the film. Or they get captured and they get tortured, and maybe you'll bring it into the Three from Hell, but like their characters go through so much shit, like so much painful. They almost get what's coming to them in a lot of ways of what they've done, because if you think about the ending of The Devil's Rejects, where they're getting shot up and you literally think the movie's over, like that's it, they can't survive that. And then you have the beginning of Three from Hell, where it's like they have 1,000 or 1,000,000% to 1 to be able to live. And it is crazy that they survive. They are some, like, you know, ungodly monsters because they survive all these horrible things that are done to them, but they've also done extremely horrible things to other people. So it's like they get some sort of karma throughout the series also.
I suppose to tie in then to the end of the trilogy, Tree from Hell, the third installment, obviously, in what's now known as the Firefly trilogy. It's set 10 years after the events of Devil's Rejects. The plot follows an incarcerated Otis and Baby being freed by Otis's half-brother. Now, I don't think that was the original idea. Sid Haig, who plays Captain Spaulding, was actually meant to have a huge role in the original script. And I don't know whether it was I don't know if he was going to get out or something. He was going to break them out or something like that. But obviously he was like super ill at the time and died not long after. So they just completely took his character out.
It is sad. Like, I liked it. It's just...
I love how you had that on cue there.
It is quite sad because he was a good actor, and you can see in the film, he is on death's doorstep.
Yeah, it's actually,
he looks horrible
when you actually see him. Yeah,
scary.
And you can tell it's not like movie makeup. You can tell like he's fucked.
So gaunt and skinny and
It's unfortunate because he's such an iconic character now as that. But yeah, I seen a lot of reviews online where people were saying like, oh yeah, fans of Zombie and his work will be excited by this film, but anyone else will have very little to lure them in of like a reason to watch it. And while that statement is quite true, that's exactly why Rob Zombie makes the movies he does. Like, why would he? Does anybody really think that he made Tree from Hell, the third part in a trilogy of these movies, to go mainstream all of a sudden?
Yeah, you can tell that it's you could say it's cheaper filmed compared to the first two, just the way that the tone of the movie and the camera that they use. But rewatching this, and even when I watched it the first time with my fiance, like, I really liked it. Like, I like the fact that like you're rooting for them.
Same.
And it's more to me of an action film than a horror film. And it's only set in like maybe two locations really. And the movie is able to be carried in that way, and it makes it enjoyable the entire time. Like, even when they hold those people hostage and shit, it's like brutal but fucked up, and it again dives into I don't know, just how psychotic they are as characters.
Yeah, and even for anybody who's still watching the video aspect of this, there's an image of the three of them in like a police lineup or whatever, or like their mugshots, and like Otis, you can tell that's like a very like Charles Manson
for sure. Yeah, 100%. That crazy eyes that fucking good old fucking Charlie would fucking always pull off. It is quite comical because you can tell that like you there's no way to work around it that Rob Zombie was influenced by the Manson family, because even you can see it with inside of Baby, like that Linda Kasabian kind of feel to her. It is because if you look at even the footage from when they were arrested and the chicks are all walking together, all like in handcuffs, and they have no remorse in that moment and couldn't give a shit. And it is pulls into, which I can't eventually wait to talk about Charles Manson, this idea of like, because I've messed around with psychedelics more and more, is like doing acid, but then also using it, because that's what Charles Manson was doing. He was using it to influence these people's minds to almost make them psychotic and crazy while he wasn't even taking it and stuff like that. It's quite crazy.
Yeah, it's fucked. And you're definitely right, and I don't think he ever shies away from the idea that he took inspiration from things like that. I suppose we'd probably be wrong if we didn't talk about probably the most controversial thing that Rob Zombie's put his hands on, which is the Halloween franchise.
You genuinely like it, right?
Yeah, and again, I will
on this
argue. Yeah, I will. because I take it exactly for what it is.
His
It's,
vision.
Rob Zombie's Halloween. It's written, directed, and produced by Rob Zombie. So you're not getting, like, it's not John Carpenter's Halloween. It's not Dimension Films' Halloween. It's his idea of how he would see his version.
Yeah, and I would say, arguably, even compared to the new ones, it is the most brutal Michael Myers that there is in a film. Like, just brutally, like, strong and crazy. And, you know, and to one thing to talk about it, I've watched videos. I dig deep on some YouTube videos when certain things. And I watched this because I really liked when it first came out. Okay, like, I really liked the movie. The kid that plays Michael Myers reminds me of one of these kids I grew up with. It, like, looked just like him. And I've had people say that to me too, that, yo, man, that looks like fucking, what's his name? And it's like, I knew, like, a kid kind of like that, you know, just kind of a crazy, rambunctious kid. And the thing that I didn't realize, which when I started looking into this and researching a little bit about Rob Zombie and Halloween, and I did this a couple of years ago when I found this YouTube video, and it's talking about what went wrong with his film, why there's some people that are very critical about it, is because at the beginning, Rob Zombie said that he wasn't going to give Michael a backstory because he thought it was far creepier that we didn't know why he was this evil. And then he flipped, and then he created this entire backstory for Michael. And there was also something else that he did that he said he wasn't going to do the first time. And like when he was like had it in his hands and was like, hey, what am I going to do with this? He's like, I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to do this. And then he flipped and did it anyway. That's what people point out
and I think
most I've seen.
Yeah. Yeah, and I definitely think that obviously, like, nobody in their right mind is going to be making movies like he did. You know, things like House of a Thousand Corpses and Devil's Rejects, and then to get the call to get your hands on something like Halloween. Nobody's going to say no to that. But I genuinely think, though, that, and not to say that he's like dumb or naive or anything, but I genuinely think at one point when he said yes, that he was convinced that he was actually going to get to make his version with no input. And you can kind of hear, like, in that Joe Rogan interview, he kind of talks about it. He kind of alludes to the fact that, like, once things actually got in motion, he started to realize how quickly he wasn't really that big of a cog in that whole thing. It was just kind of like, you know, we know you're here and we know you're the director and you wrote it and you're co-producing it and everything, but also shut up because we're paying the bill.
Yeah, and he said that that's where it gets muddy, especially for big time films where like this, that they need a certain turnout or box office result. And one thing I could pick at and I could say that I don't like about this movie, there's very good points. But one thing I could say is I don't necessarily like the mask. The how it's worn out with the kind of like Stitch look kind of thing, I don't really like that.
Yeah, no, I could agree with that. And also it only gets progressively worse as we get into the
it's like
sequel.
Broken up and it's not even a mask anymore. It's just like,
yeah, like a lot of people class this as a remake, which it's not. It's I suppose a reimagining of the story with zombies filter over it. I think he got a budget of like 15 million, and like the box office done like over 80
something
million,
new and different, and people
like,
liked House of a Thousand Corpses and stuff like that. That's what they knew of, like, zombie from a lot of people.
So before this was this ties into actually a book that I talked about on the Halloween episodes called Taking Shape, which like details the whole history of Halloween and blah blah blah. But before this movie was actually greenlit, the original plan that they were moving forward with, and it actually got like relatively far along in the process, was Hellraiser and Halloween having a crossover. It was going to be called Halloween.
Are you serious?
You know, this is a real thing, right? So it was going to be called Halloween. That was one of the original titles that they came up with. And it was going to have young Michael Myers, and he would open the Lament configuration box. He was going to be like some sort of weird, like, sexual pervert serial killer. They were going to like bring that.
This
into
was
it.
Whose idea? Rob's.
So no. This had nothing to do with him. And Clive Barker was going to write the script, and John Carpenter was going to direct the movie.
part of me really wanted that to happen. That would have been sick.
know, right?
I've read some of,
right?
like I have one of Clive Barker's books. Just kind of got into it like a couple years ago, like maybe a year or two ago. I didn't end up finishing it because I was reading all these other books, more conspiracy based stuff. And I wanted to actually legitimately read it because it has to do with Pinhead. And it's like, which one is it? I have it somewhere. And that would have been fucking interesting because Clive Barker can write.
And, you know, he had kind of said that it wasn't going to be Pinhead versus Michael Myers per se, or just like mash the two of them together like Freddy and Jason. It was going to be more, they wanted to find ways of like, where would Myers' universe cross over potentially with the Hellraiser
so
universe.
Crazy they're going to do that. And I would like to discuss it, but I think because it's appropriate time since the new Hellraiser is coming out, I think it looks fairly good from the trailer I saw.
So I'm going to go back on something I said last week, I think it was, where I had said I'm not excited for it. If it's not Doug Bradley, it's not Pinhead. I don't care. It's the same as Robert Englund with Freddy Krueger, which I still believe that to a degree. But I have to say, when I seen that trailer,
her
that looks
voice,
really
her
fucking
voice
good.
in general is like very creepy. And okay, cool. If it was another guy, which they've done like Fat Pinhead, which I didn't even watch, I kind of do want to watch Judgment Day, just to see what it's like because it looks kind of. Have you seen Judgment Day? Was it any good? It looked kind of scary. I'm gonna say probably not.
Not really. I didn't really care for Pinhead or anything. There's another character in it called the Auditor.
The sunglasses
I
guy.
quite liked him. I quite liked his character, but
I'm not gonna watch it if you're saying it's not that great. But at least to me, it's like Doug Bradley is always the person that's gonna be Pinhead. But if it's a female, you kind of disassociate that. Hey, they could create a new character of kind of Pinhead, and it wouldn't necessarily infringe on the original Hellraiser. Yeah, so to speak.
Yeah, and I think if you go back to like the novels and stuff, I think it was kind of implied that I know there's this whole thing like I think essentially Pinhead and the Cenobites were like these like genderless kind of creatures, but I do think that it was alluded to more that Pinhead was actually a female than a
which
male.
is interesting. I feel like I've seen that within the novels too. But also, Clive Barker, for another episode for our time, definitely was into the BDSM. So,
oh yeah, big time.
But like even this film, there's so many
big time.
So many different points too. Like the beginning is when he's a fucking kid, and then I'm like, I don't know if I like the long hair, but then I'm like, hey, if he's not cutting his hair, who's cutting his hair? He technically has to have long hair. If you just left your hair, like who's cutting his hair, right? So you kind of have to have it. Make the most sense,
and, like,
I guess.
You definitely get like Devil's Rejects kind of vibes again, you know, with the family and how like dysfunctional they are. And like
someone I saw critiquing it said they didn't like that there was
and
so much swearing. That's like Rob Zombie just has to include like saying the fuck a million times. And if you've listened to Strange Brew podcast or me on any of Aaron's shows, I say the F word a lot and I swear. And sometimes I'm editing and I'm like, I said fuckity fuck fucking fuck like within like 4 minutes, and I'm like, oh, okay, I gotta try to keep that at bay, and maybe not, because I don't know if that necessarily turns people off. Is a lot of swearing, but I've had legitimately people and fans say I like that it's more genuine. And somebody commented a while ago saying, you know, this sounds like I'm smoking up with my buddies, having a couple drinks, and just having a conversation about something strange.
Yeah, and that's what I like about it. It's more real. It's fine to be all, you know, politically correct and don't be yourself and don't talk the way you normally talk. I mean, it is what it is. I used the term mongoloid one time on a podcast, and I got absolutely brutalized. But hey, you know what? I might be wrong for it, but at one point in my life, I used terms like that as like a comedy bit where I'd be like, oh, fucking mongoloid.
I don't see that as offensive. It's like calling someone a troglodyte.
Yeah, like I mean, look, I didn't mean it in that sense, but yeah, I don't understand the thing about the swearing and stuff. I mean, like look at his material, like what that's
and it was
what
it was a abusive kind of family setting where it's just like you're poor, the dad's an alcoholic.
Yeah, of course, and of course that's the way that those people are going to behave. Like, you're not going to have like the nice dad and the
No.
white picket fence, and it's all
And
going to be great.
I've
It's going to
known
be
kids
kind
like
of
this
scummy and
in
gritty.
elementary school and like high school that just had really shitty upbringings, like, you know, alcoholic parents, and you can see it with inside them. They're like, sometimes they're like kind of chill kids, but then you can see an underlying, I don't know, trauma, or like they're just fucked and they think that things are funny that are not, and you can definitely tell.
Yeah, for sure. You're right as well. It's a much more violent version of Michael Myers. And like, I do like that he gave him like all these different reasons to kind of not. I don't feel like he gave him reasons to become a killer. It was more a reason that like this was the straw that broke the camel's back. Like, this was already inside of him, but being in this environment now has kind of unlocked this. It hasn't made him a serial killer, but it was in him, and these people in this situation didn't help.
You know, and then he breaks out of fucking jail,
which I kind of like. The original script actually was like way more graphic as well, and way more violent. There's the scene with the bully near the start, where he like hits him with the fucking branch or whatever, and like beats the shit out of him. Yeah, it's like, and that even still to this day, like, kind of makes me a little bit uncomfortable.
I can see that. Me too.
That's a little bit fucking grim. But that scene originally wasn't like that at all. So what happened there was he still gets like fucked up by the bullies and whatever. But in a rage, he lures a 9-year-old girl into the woods. He tortures her, beats her to death, and kills her. And then he pisses on her dead body. Wow.
I could have went totally different, but I do see why. I started to understand Rob Zombie's influences on stuff. There's like stories of like real stories of like these two kids that lured, I think, a 4-year-old boy into a forest. They took him from a mall, and the kids were like 8 and 10. And I feel like we talked about this way back in the day when we were drinking a lot on the podcast doing the Killer Kids episode. And they cut off this kid's dick and shit, and like, it was horrible. And this is a real fucking story. So to display these sort of behaviors from these psychotic children in movies does make sense.
So I can't remember their names off the top of my head. That was a case in the UK, a really famous case, and it's still like quite divisive. Actually, it's really interesting. It would make for a good episode
one day.
Because those dudes are fucked in the head. Yeah, they kidnapped him from a mall when he was with his mother, I think, and they brought him to railway tracks, and they like sexually assaulted him and like shoved like sticks up his ass, and then they start like they put him on the train tracks, and they like smashed, like they were like throwing bricks on his head and stuff, and like jumping.
We should talk about that on another episode too, because I would just like to dive into like how does a monster like that get created? It's like what Rob Zombie was trying to show during this movie.
And there's some incredible interrogation footage from those kids that's like unsettling.
I know, it's talk. Fucking
it's
creepy, like killer kids.
Fucked.
And I wanted to say that last night I watched X, that new horror movie, and it was fairly fucking weird. And that's like one thing that Chelsea doesn't like, my fiance, is naked, creepy old women. And man, the old women trope now that's in so many movies, it's like, oh my god, even in The Witch, it's just like naked old ladies are gross. Sorry, but
they are. It's fucking horrible. I'm excited to see Pearl, which is the prequel to X. Weird. It's been getting quite good reviews. The one final thing that I did find about Rob Zombie's Halloween is there was another scene that was cut apparently, and it was like super disturbing. Like, everybody that saw it was like, no fucking way. He kills somebody with a baseball bat, a chick, and like bludgeons her, I think, like beyond belief, and then proceeds to sexually assault her with the bat.
That's fucked. That's some Ted Bundy shit. 'Cause Ted Bundy used that big spray can bottle for hairspray and shoved it up a fucking woman's ass or vagina or something.
Jesus,
I love that scene. It was good to you, Mikey. Like, I felt bad for Danny Trejo.
Yeah, same. That right before that, actually, that scene where the dudes break into his room, that always disturbs me.
And like, I don't know if we should just kind of mention Halloween too. I think that we should soon kind of bring it to a close, talking about the monsters and stuff like that. But I feel like if we're going to, I need to rewatch 31 because I've only seen parts of it when it first kind of came out to discuss it at a good level, which we could even do an episode just on 31 because I have really yet to give it a fair shot, I would say.
Yeah, and I'm the same with Lords of Salem.
I've seen that.
As well. I've seen it, but I don't think I've given it the time of day. Really, I feel like I'd like to go back and watch Lords of Salem and 31 and actually give them like a bit more time.
Which could even, for everyone, Halloween, we could make a slightly a part 2, you could say, down the road, and maybe. I think this might be a good idea if we kind of bring on the close maybe of Halloween 2 and kind of maybe excited for what could be coming. But maybe we'll have like a part 2-ish, even in a couple weeks kind of thing, or a month, where we discuss 31 Lords of Salem and what he has coming out soon.
Yeah, I suppose just to touch on Halloween 2 very lightly, he originally wasn't going to come back for the sequel, and shit, they had all these different scripts and it wasn't working, and somebody I think sat down and were like, please do it. So he apparently wrote, directed, produced this again. He didn't sign on for the sequel. He was asked to return, but once again it wasn't 100% his movie. He shot multiple versions of nearly every scene. He shot 3 or 4 different endings. There was another ending that was shot where Myers and Loomis crash out through the side of the shed, and Myers stabs Loomis in the stomach, and then the police blow him away, basically. And then Laurie comes out, and she picks up Michael's knife, and then they blow her away as well. But yeah, I don't know. Like, I have a lot of thoughts about Halloween 2. I feel like we could probably put that in the potential. Yeah,
let's do that. That's a good idea because I want to. What I want to do is I want to rewatch Halloween 2 because the whole mask thing, man, and the old man Myers. It's there's so many things that I think that I need to rewatch it, sit down and really get into it so I can talk about and have it fresh in my mind to talk about. So I think I might even do like 31 and then Salem and then Halloween 2 so it can be super fresh in my mind when we decide to do this, because I feel like I need to revisit it and really dissect it, which could also maybe lead into watching Halloween 2 for a commentary so we can fucking shit on it like we did Halloween H2O and let's fucking pick it apart.
Yeah, I think that would be a really good idea, an interesting idea. I suppose just to kind of bring in some other stuff that he's done. Obviously, he done the Twins of Evil tour there a while back, which looked absolutely amazing. He has the Haunted World of El Super Beasto. A lot of people don't know he's done a lot of comic
saw
book
that
work.
And I was like, nah, it's okay.
It's not really for me, but like it has a pretty cult following. For anyone who's watching the video version of this, you'll see on screen now there's like all these different movie title names. So these are just a few of the movies that his music was featured in or was like a theme for.
The Matrix, weird. Urban Legend, which some of these films is something I would like to talk about eventually too. Like Urban Legend is, I feel like the 1 and 2 are fairly good movies. Valentine 2 is something I want to do. Jeepers Creepers. Okay, that's weird. Yeah. Someone was saying, was it Gordo that like the Book of Shadows, like the Blair Witch 2, which I don't think I've ever even seen. Gordo was saying somehow he enjoyed it, that it was like a pretty good movie, and I don't feel like I've ever seen it.
I love that movie. I would also love to do a commentary with you at some point if you're down for Patreon. That's one that
we can
really
definitely do
like
that
to do
because
I
will technically be going in blind, so it might be interesting to see my point of view.
Yeah, that would be interesting. Yeah,
awesome.
That would be really interesting. Obviously, on top of that, Rob Zombie was mentioned many times as a massive part in having Halloween Horror Nights revived again. And, you know, it's kind of come full circle for him now because House of a Thousand Corpses, The Devil's Rejects, all that stuff has been made into haunt attractions in Universal. I actually had the chance to do the House of a Thousand Corpses in Orlando, and I got to do his Hellbilly Deluxe Scare Zone in Orlando,
Like
which
the
was fucking
maze, House
amazing.
Decor
They had like
in 3D. That's sick.
yeah, like in the outside scare zone thing, they had like the Dracula
that's
car,
sick.
and they had like all the different, like the Living Dead girl. They had like a stage, and it was basically like a chick reenacting the video
that's
for
so
Living
cool.
Dead girl while the music played. Yeah, they had stuff like that, which has got to be crazy for him. And a lot of people don't know as well, he actually had his own haunt attraction
Yeah, I
for a
heard about
couple
that.
years. Yeah, where he had done
The Great
Haunt
American
of a Thousand
Nightmare.
Corpses, and yeah, apparently it was supposed to be like pretty legit. Like the production value was like really high level, and like the attention to detail was like great. And I don't know what happened. I don't know if like funding got pulled, and you know, he's probably getting pulled in all these, because he does try to do a lot. Like he's like, you know, he has a haunt attraction, and he's trying to work on like Halloween 2, and he's trying to go on tour, and he's trying to make a new album. It's a lot of fucking shit to be trying to do.
No,
like.
for sure. And like it makes sense. That's why it's probably like, and it would have been so fun. And something I've toyed at with eventually on the Patreon is if one day we're able to pull it off, or all four of us, or even me, you, and Anton kind of thing, is even like recording us walking through a haunted house. Like obviously doing stuff where we maybe go to an actual real haunted house and record us using something like a spirit box or a Ouija board or something kind of creepy like that. But also the idea of recording us and our reactions of walking through a haunted house would be a lot of fun. And I do think that I thought this would be long, but I do think that there needs to come a part 2 where we can dive more into Halloween 2, 31, Lords of Salem, and discuss. I do think that needs to be I think we have to do that, is maybe even do a commentary on Halloween 2, so then, you know, we can discuss the film for the Patreon listeners and then really dissect it and talk about it on the second part, you could say, of Rob Zombie. We could name it something completely different, but I do think it would be appropriate to revisit this sometime soon.
Yeah, because there's so many little offshoots of everything he's done as well, and I don't think anything he's put his hand to has just been like a straightforward story. There's always been like some crazy shit that's happened, and like even I'm sure that we'll probably have, we don't have to touch on it right now, and we could probably do it in a couple of weeks because the movie will have come out, because it's due out in like 2 or 3 days, I think it is. But like Rob Zombie doing the Monsters, which again is another like massively like. There's one, like, because that's going to be on Netflix worldwide. So there's something that we could do for like, I don't know, like a live watch
we should
party
really
or something
figure
like
that out,
because
even
could.
It'll probably be better even if maybe I watch it the first time with my fiance and then we watch it as a watch party. So then I'm going into it for a second time and maybe like analyzing it more, because it looks weird. It looks like a Rob Zombie film, that's for sure.
It does. Yeah. It does. It looks wild. Like there's some images on screen right now. I don't know how I feel about it.
I grew up watching the Monsters.
Wow, this looks fucking
I used to watch it every day at lunch when I would like come home from like for lunch from school. I used to watch this show a lot. Like I was always watching the Monsters. So I'm hesitant on what it looks like.
But again, I feel like something that I'm going to stress again, and I could absolutely end up fucking hating this, but I think we're going to have to do that thing where if you see there on the poster it says a Rob Zombie film, we're probably going to have to try, and which is so hard to do when it's an existing IP, to like tell yourself like, okay, don't think of it as which is, and the only thing I do kind of like is obviously it's based on the 1960s sitcom, but the story actually takes place prior to the events of the sitcom, and it serves as an origin story. It follows the meeting and eventual marriage of Herman and Lily Munster in Transylvania, despite the protests of her dad. The only thing I will say in his defense, he is a lifelong fan of the TV series, and apparently he went on record saying that he has spent over 20 years trying to get involved with making a Monsters movie. So I'm
fingers
crossed that this is not fucking garbage. But I can't. Again, I was going to say I can't imagine Netflix buying it if it was garbage. But they have done weirder things. It's a ridiculous statement.
Look at what was that fucking creepy movie that they made that people were like, "This is really pedophilic. Why did they produce this film?" Is there some weird things?
So I can't say that. But yeah, look.
I feel like we have to do a part 2 now, which is I didn't think we would be going into it doing a part 2.
Same, like I knew this was going to be
Yeah.
potentially long, but I didn't think that we were going to be like 2 hours
And still
into
could
a
do another
podcast
hour
with
or
like
two.
not having talked about probably half
Yeah.
the shit that we could. And I feel like both of us were even still kind of curbing.
I
a lot
was
of our
for sure.
thoughts
I'm
on some of
trying
this
to
stuff.
like keep the reins.
Yeah.
Trying to hold the reins back so the horses
Yeah,
don't go
it's-
too far.
it's tough, and I kind of knew coming into this. I don't know if you could tell, but like I have a bit more I don't know, a bit more energy or something once I get
Yes, me
going
too,
on a
as you
topic,
build up.
and especially somebody like him. He's one of my favorite filmmakers, one of my favorite musicians, and other than Lords of Salem and 31, I would say like I love
which I need to
everything else he's
revisit
done,
to
like,
discuss
to
it,
a
yeah.
massive degree. Yeah, so I think it'll be interesting. Maybe we can do maybe a shorter form episode where we talk about them, because I haven't seen those. I've probably seen them
Yeah,
less than
me
5
too.
times each. So I would like to see both of them again, and maybe then have
That's a good idea,
conversation.
and I do think to shout out for this too. Like this is why the Patreon's so not so expensive, but so important. It's not expensive at all. Actually, it's fairly. Both of ours are extremely cheap. In Yvonne Strange Brew, you get like it's $3 a month, and you get so many different content and like video content where people are charging out the ass for their video content, and then you got to pay $2 or $3 just to have episodes before they release, which is like, so I'm doing overall
it's just
one
sick,
tier until it starts really getting brought up and people really start supporting it. But that you'll see things like, I think a lot of the commentary stuff is a lot of fun. It's easy to do. We just sit, record, watch a movie together, and it is very, I think, good content, funny and exciting stuff that we're getting into. But I would like to do a commentary on Halloween 2, which will bring us into maybe within the next couple of days after we do that initial commentary, is to record the second part of Rob Zombie's episode, essentially. Because it's funny, I was like, 2 hours we'll be able to cover him, but no, it need almost to be 3 or 4 hours. And I think it's appropriate. We definitely need to do a part 2, like for sure.
Yeah, I don't know. It's just like like we said, there's a lot of stuff that surrounds a lot of his work, and I think that kind of pulls you away sometimes from being able to do it concisely. So definitely for everybody who's made it this far, keep an eye out on our socials for maybe a shorter form part 2 to kind of cover the rest of Rob Zombie. Halloween 2 commentary, which we're definitely going to pin down at some point. Potentially, depending on how we feel about the whole Monsters thing, we may do something,
party.
some sort of a live stream commentary. Yeah, something like that might be fun. And just so many other things like fucking Blair Witch 2, and this is after getting my like creative juices.
There's so many things
now.
We could do.
I would love to do House of a Thousand Corpses at some point.
Yeah, that would be an interesting commentary
that whole-
too, because then we could, as we're watching it, talk about what we think of the film, and that's why I think it's very exciting, because I want to do we're calling it the host head commentary on our side of the world of doing even comedy movies and obscure stuff like that. That stuff that, you pay a little extra so you can sit down, watch, and have this little fun time with the strange individuals that we are. And there's a lot of stuff in the works that gets me going, where I'm like, I see something, I'm like, hey, I want to do this episode with you. We got to do this, that stuff with even me, you, and Anton, where we do commentaries together. There's a talk to do, Killer Clowns from Outer Space. I really want to do that as a commentary. And then part of me is like, maybe we'll release it on the main show for a week or two and then put it strictly on the Patreon, so people kind of get an idea of what you're to expect on some of the commentary episodes, at least on the Patreon. Because there's a lot of stuff in the works.
Sure.
I know there's a lot of stuff that Anton wants to do with you. So Strange Brew and Class Horrorcast is kind of coming together as like a little family, and being able to do cross promotions and swap cast that could be a lot of fun.
100%, and I would agree with all that. And there's probably another million.
I already thought
I
it was like earlier, and then I lost what it was. But I was like, I want to do this with you, because there's so many different things that I want to get into.
So for my side of things, as always, classhorrorcast.com. You can find everything there. I'm on all major podcast platforms. I'm most active on Instagram under First Class Horror. I'm trying to get the TikTok and stuff going, but I just don't have the
I
personality
just
you
yell
do.
about shit, or
I
I'm like,
post, like-
"Hey, you guys ever heard of this murderer that fucking murdered kids?" It's just like, and then people are like, "Ooh." But the thing is, if I could generate the numbers that I have on TikTok towards actually subscribing to the show and the YouTube, I would probably be famous. But TikTok is a different beast because it's thousands of people that just instantly click like, and then they see your videos maybe once or twice in a month or two. And unless they're people that are actually fans and genuinely like, oh, I like this guy, I want to see what else he's doing. You know, if I could push it towards getting the fans of me just talking about politics or strange, weird things like serial killers, I'm sure that the show would be all over the world by now.
Yeah, I would imagine so. So for people then who maybe don't know somehow, where can people find you, and where's the place that you would like
so
to
I would
direct
like
everybody?
the YouTube is something I'm trying to build up because we have thousands, it feels like, people that listen to our podcast on audio form, but there's a lot of things on YouTube that you get when you're watching the shows, especially when we do podcast episodes. It's like pictures and even sometimes clips. Me and Aaron, we did the haunted Ireland versus Canada episode. We watched some scary videos beforehand to get us in the mood for the episode that you won't get on the audio. But obviously you can find everything at www.strangerpodcast.com, and my bladder is going to burst. I need to have a pee
Likewise,
thing, like a
actually, funny you said
catheter
that.
when I'm recording episodes. I really like. If I could do it, I would probably.
There's times I move around an awful lot on screen if people notice that, and that's when I'm starting to get like.
Yeah,
it's
I've
like,
been rubbing my
piss
legs for
pants.
like 20 minutes because I've had to pee so bad. And that's what happens with these episodes, that you almost need to have like a little break, because even Billy's like, I'm going to piss my pants. This needs to stop, because actually when we're drinking like alcohol, it's like you need to have that be right back. Do, 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 do.
Yeah.
But I appreciate everyone that, makes their way through all these podcasts and, that genuinely enjoys what we're trying to do. And I do think that we are extremely unique in the content that we're putting out.
Yeah, for sure. You need to have something like I did at one point. Wait, it's going to make a liar out of me now.
Now, back to Class Hardcast with Aaron Doyle.
Yeah, something where we're like...
But
Yeah.
the other way around.
Yeah.
I
might... Yeah,
but yeah, look...
What do you want to bring it to a close?
let's let's wrap this up, because I think both of us are struggling right now. I don't know if anybody can tell, but we're starting to fall apart here fairly quick. Yeah, look, we appreciate everybody listening. Keep an eye on our socials, as we said, and on the websites for
And from
all the
Strange
stuff coming up
Brew.
soon.
Everybody love everybody! Come on!
See ya.
Peace, everybody.